when I enjoy your presence more than I enjoy my solitude, then I know that there's something there for me to pursue. But whenever I'm with someone and I'm kind of going, okay, I'd rather just be alone right now. But I think so many people are afraid to be alone.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Season 3 premiere of The Modern Man. It's a pleasure to have you. It's also a pleasure to be here at Camaraderie Co-work right off the Swamp Rabbit Trail. It's behind us. I'm excited to jump in today's episode. Sitting to my left, a former guest, now guest panelist, Ryan Alford, actually the owner of Radical and Camaraderie. We appreciate you having us here today.
Hey, my pleasure. Glad to be here.
Definitely, definitely. And to my far right, we have Charles Russ, panelist, the one, the only. And I'm excited to introduce our guest today, George Cowart, owner of Cowart Awards, local businessman, father, and just all-around great dude, man. Good to have you.
Nice to be here again.
How you doing?
Good.
So we're gonna jump into today's topic, and I think it's a topic that a lot of men kind of maybe shy away from talking about in public. So I'm excited to jump into this head first. And we're talking about life after divorce. And I know that you've had your personal experience through that. And before we jump into your story, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to those watching so they can get to know you really quick, and then we can kind of jump into some questions.
My name is George Cowart, born and raised here in Greenville, South Carolina. I have Cowart Awards over on Lawrence Road. I'm a father. I have two children, Tripp and Emerson. Tripp is 11, Emerson is 8, and they're awesome. And I share them with my now ex-wife, and we split time 50-50. So yeah, this is a perfect topic to talk about today, because it is something that guys don't talk a lot about. So excited to be here. We did the No Rain, No Rainbows, and glad to be back with you.
Definitely. And I mean, hopping right into it, because I know we can kind of explore the stories and some practices on life after divorce. So I don't want to focus on divorce too much, because I want to keep the positive aspect of really empowering the men out there who might be going through it to, seek their greatness moving forward. But why do you think initially divorce as it is something that's just so hard for men to go through?
It's funny. I always say that I never recognized Ford trucks until I started driving a Ford truck. And I didn't recognize how much divorce there was because it wasn't a part of my life. And I think when something impacts our lives, we then take notice. But I think it's because, for most guys, I'm competitive. I don't like, I think sometimes we look at it as losing, especially if it's not something that we sought out. So if we're the receiver of the divorce versus the seeker of the divorce, I think it affects you differently. But I think it's just that. I think it's it's a very, very simple question that has a very broad answer. It depends on what the situation was. I mean, it can cause you a whole host of thoughts. Was I good enough? What did I do wrong? And sometimes it has nothing to do with you. Sometimes it's just the situation or the person.
Yeah. I know everybody has their own personal experiences with it. Ryan, what would you say is kind of what I guess resonates with you when you think of how devastating it could be to some guys?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on my second marriage. I've been divorced. I've been remarried for almost 6 years. And what was interesting for me is most people would paint the picture of my divorce as I was the instigator. Like I was the one that broke up the marriage or wanted to be divorced. I didn't know in the moment of going through it that that's what I was seeking. I was behaving, and it wasn't that I was running around town or being a complete jerk or necessarily that, but I was displaying, my ex-wife and I had some incompatibilities, and I didn't talk to people about that, and I didn't really have I didn't even know it in my own self that that's what I was going through. Like, I just thought, my career was taking off, the kids, we had two boys. From the outside looking in, it should have been a good scenario, but internally I was fighting a war of not being the person or feeling comfortable with something, and I could never put a finger on it. So thus, it was almost things just manifested from there. And they weren't as, some things were easily identifiable as this couple isn't working out, this guy is not doing and acting like a good husband. But a lot of it was not that. It was other behaviors that I would do and didn't really even recognize until a few years later, kind of looking back, you know, how unhappy I was. And, you know, the tough thing coming out of it was everybody wants to put things in boxes, you know, like this person's fault, it was that person's fault, you know, like the court systems kind of do that. And we split our kids. We have, you know, my ex-wife has them 8 out of 14 days. I have 6 out of 14. So I fought hard for that in court. And that's another, you know, that's a whole other avenue with the children. It's complicated, but I spent a lot of money and fought a hard war to get the time that I have. But I will say I have a lot of respect for my ex-wife, but I also have a new perspective on what divorce is, and you know how it gets looked at by people, the judgment, the perception, all of those things, and you do feel like a failure. I mean, you know, like I'd never failed at anything in my life, but I failed miserably in my marriage the first time around. But you know, I will say it's led to the best relationship I've ever had in my life with my current wife, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. But it's a taboo subject that probably isn't talked about enough with men.
Yeah, that's why we're talking about it today. And I think there are a couple things that were powerfully hit. I know, Charles, you probably have some reflection on that too.
Well, actually, like, so what these guys said, I've never been married, you know, but I do have kids with someone I'm not with, so it's definitely something that resonated. But I'd ask question to both of you that could possibly apply also to people to a relationship. Do you feel like the failure and the competitiveness and the wanting to succeed forced you into holding on to that relationship longer than you should have? One, and two, not just for guys who are married, but also guys who are in a relationship and they're fighting to hold it. What would you tell those guys right now about letting go versus trying to hold on and fight for it? So I would like to push that to both of you guys.
So I have two thoughts on that. One, saying that you know, basically we hold on too long. So I think that, especially depending on where you're coming from in the divorce, and I've gotten to talk a lot. This isn't just based on me, but I've talked to a lot of guys going through divorce. They've sought me out. I guess because I didn't break down and go crazy, they go, hey, how did you do it? And so what I see a pattern of is you have two people that may not be compatible in this moment, and they almost rewrite the history of their relationship. Because every relationship, when they get together, nobody goes, hey, let's get together so we can get divorced, or let's get together so we can break up. Everybody's going to get together, and it's forever, right? It's everybody's playing for keeps. At some point, whenever things start to break down, the relationship starts breaking down, one person, usually who doesn't want the relationship to end, rewrites the history as perfect. And the other one rewrites the history as horrible. And there's two truths. You know, together they probably make the truth.
Somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle is where it is. So, you know, why too many people hold on? I think it's because we're afraid of change. Guys don't typically like change. We're you know, we kind of want to cruise through and you know, but I guess that's why we hold on. It's the fear of failure, and I held on way too long, and you know, I don't necessarily regret that because it taught me a lot. It finally showed me that I'm not in control. Like, as much as you want something to happen, if it involves another person, that other person has to come along. They have to agree to that. You can't you can't force somebody to stay married. You can't force somebody to stay in a relationship. And when that happens, it can have an adverse effect. It pushes that person further away versus allowing that person to be who they are and you be who you are. And that typically, that confidence will usually attract that person back if they're supposed to be there. I don't know if that answered.
Well, I don't think there's a flat answer, but I definitely understand everything you're saying. Moran, I'd ask you the same question, and specifically do you feel like you held on to it too long, or even from the other side that she tried to hold on too long? Maybe from, and if so, why? Was it competitive? Was it, I just don't want to fail. I got to make this look like it worked. Was it a facade for the universe that I'm successful and I make it work? And then, like I said, the next piece, not only in divorce but also in relationships, same thought process. You've been dating someone 3 or 4 years, you just don't let go when it, for lack of a better way to put it, is dead. What advice would you have for those guys?
Well, ironically, I would say, back to what I was saying, I was the one that recognized that the relationship didn't have longevity. But what is interesting is, even once, some of that activity was manifesting and we were headed towards divorce, I still held on in a weird way. I was like, and I don't know, it wasn't competition for me, like a competitive thing. It's probably more pride. It was like the optics.
Yeah.
What's everybody gonna think? What's everybody gonna say? What's everybody gonna do? And pride's a powerful thing and a terrible thing sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it definitely made me I held on longer than I should have, or probably didn't take all the steps. It's just interesting, really reflecting on it. Like you get this clarity on the other end of it that you don't have in the moment, and like it almost pains me, like thinking about like some of the moments that I had in the middle of it, like some of the decisions and some of the ways that you think you're in control, and again you've got another party on the other end, and we're all programmed to think about numero uno. But it's so complex, especially when there's kids and other things. But it was less competitive, more pride, and even recognizing that the relationship wasn't going to last. I was holding on in the latter stages. It's like, okay, maybe we shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
Wait. Like I know I've said we should or whatever. But, oh no, but we should. And you're like, and in the moment, I didn't mean it.
Yeah.
But I'm not. We're not perfect people, but in the moment, I started to recognize her pain, and so I was almost holding on for her.
Yeah.
As wacky as that sounds, like not because, but I was like, and so, but definitely pride. Things just start going through your head that you don't plan for on the pride side, and everybody thinks they know the truth and what's going on, and it's ugly. Even when we didn't have a nasty divorce, as I call them. I mean, no divorce is pretty.
Yeah, that's right.
But it wasn't drugged through the newspaper or whatever. It didn't impact my work. I mean, I was transparent with work, and I was living halfway in New York too, which probably helped a little bit, and not just still had a home here in Greenville, but it was a little bit sheltered by distance. But
yeah. Well, you both kind of alluded to something about like the hindsight of experiencing divorce, right? And I think coming from a place that's healed, or coming from a place where you can look in hindsight, you can see the forest when you're no longer in the trees.
Sure.
For anyone that's watching that might be in their own forest right now, who might be going through the thick of the experience of going through the divorce, whether they initiated it or their partner did, what would you say to them in that moment? What should they do? What are the practices they do that they can navigate it? Because I know a lot of men sometimes feel lost in those moments, and they don't know what to do. And I think we've talked about before is like sometimes they isolate, which is probably the last thing to do. So I'll toss it your way, George, first, in terms of like, what's the action steps for someone in that position?
Well, I can only speak for me personally, what I did, and this is the advice that I give some guys that going through is, and I had great guys that, anytime I'm doing something, whether it's personally or business, I always seek out the person that's done it before me. And I want to know what they did, and I want to know the pros and the cons and what they wish they would have done different. I think the biggest thing, having that person that had already been there, they gave me validation that I wasn't going crazy. Because like Ryan said, that even though divorce doesn't have to be nasty, it's definitely a very trying process. you think it's going to go smooth, and there's always something that's going to come up, whether it's financial or if it's something that comes out, and it becomes personal. Even when you don't plan on it becoming personal, it can become personal really quick. So I think just validation that your feelings are normal, because guys don't like to talk about their feelings. So that the feelings that you're having, that possible angst, that anxiety that you may feel, that not knowing, but knowing that it's going to be okay on the other side. And as bad as it's going to be on this side of it, the blessing can be equally as big and bold on the other side of it. So that, and then just personal advice, I go, don't isolate. Just like you said, stay active, keep your mind active. Don't drink alone. Like if I'm not a big drinker. I will socially drink, but I've never been one to consume a lot of alcohol. And I had a friend tell me, they said, if you're going to drink, don't drink alone. And I never thought about that, but I've known people that will isolate and then start drinking by themselves in their house, and it becomes a problem really quick. So I think I talked to you about this a little bit, and for me, it was like, I think in the moment, anytime something is hard or uncomfortable, our initial thought is to get away from that. I got to get away from this. I got to make this uncomfortableness stop. And I learned that it doesn't go away unless you embrace it, unless you face it. Most of the time, you can suppress it. Some people suppress it with a vice. Some people suppress it by just avoiding it altogether. But I feel like when you press into it and face it, that's whenever you begin to heal from it. So that was the biggest thing for me is as much as we try to avoid the things that we're afraid of, let's go ahead and face it and get it over with. And like most of us know from experience, that the other side of it, you're like, okay, it was bad, but was it really that bad? So that's basically the and surround yourself with some guys that you can do this with, because I think that's the majority of we get in our jobs, we get in our careers, we get in our hobbies, and we just we grind and we just keep going forward instead of stopping and reflecting and being transparent with other guys that love us enough to tell us the truth and call us on the stuff that we need to be called on, and helping hold each other accountable.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight again, I kind of buried myself in my work. I stayed busy, and I didn't talk to a lot of people. Like I ended up staying with some friends, like in their spare bedroom, and during separation and part of all that process, and definitely had a couple of my good friends that I was able to talk to. But I'm stubborn, like most men, I'm sure. I do a lot of my research, less of talking and more like reading. So I read a lot about it and read stories about how guys had handled it and done different things. But I more than anything put my head down. I think I was more productive at work than I'd ever been, just because I had consumed myself with it. But I also consumed myself with my kids, in a way. They became therapy, even they didn't know it. They were 2 and 4 at the time. And in hindsight, again, a blessing is they'll never, and again, this was not plates being thrown, abusive, again, it wasn't pretty, but they weren't subjected to anything like that. But they won't remember us ever being together. And if there is a blessing, I am thankful for that in a way, because they only were, how many members do you have from 2? But I kind of buried, my therapy was in my children in a way, and I didn't know it, and it wasn't because I was talking to them in any way, shape, or form about it, and I highly don't recommend that. Do not, if you have children involved, keep them as separate from it as possible, because they have nothing to do with it, other than being, unfortunate, having to watch on as it's happening and be, but as much as you can separate them. But I would say put your time and energy into your kids if you have them, and definitely stay busy.
Was there anything with either of you guys, because what I see when I talk to a lot of people about relationships in general, especially ones that and we see these people out all the time, they've been in a relationship a long time, but you see it, and you see it doesn't work, but they don't see it. and you're like, man, that's not it. But what I find with a lot of those conversations is something happened at the start of that relationship, be it one of them cheated and they said, okay, we're going to forgive each other, I'm going to forgive you, but they never really, you still don't trust them, you still don't believe them when they're out, or they lied about money, they got, one of them's really in debt and they lied about it, and now you find out, and now you just don't trust anything they do when they, well, where are you buying that, what are you doing? And that cloud stays over the relationship for the rest of it, and I think a lot of us have probably done something like that in a relationship when we're younger. Maybe you messed around, whatever it was, and you would hope that the person forgives you, but in all honesty, they never really do, and that cloud just floats over the relationship, and I see that happen a lot, and I feel like there's literally almost like you got to set almost. As hard as it sounds, you almost have to set like cutoff point. Like, look, man, it's been 3 years. Either you're gonna let it go, or this can't work, because I can't live this way. Did you have any experience like that, or would you even speak to a thought process on that? Be it something that they did to you, or something that you did to them?
I won't speak to exactly what happened, but I see that in other relationships as well. I would tell, I don't know if Ryan's the same way, but coming from a relationship that didn't work, no matter what happened in that relationship, it definitely gives you somewhat of a superpower to be able to see into relationships, because you grow. I mean, there's guys that fight wars that I won't ever know what that's like. You know what I'm saying? You can't know it unless you're in it. So you do definitely see that in other relationships. And I've gotten to counsel some people that have been, the same kind of things, whether it be infidelity or whether it be money, or something like that, and there's trust lost. I always ask them, I want to know how they fight. Do you fight dirty? Or do you, basically, I grew up in a big family. We don't like each other all the time, but we love each other. So things are expressed verbally, and we get over it, and we talk about it, and everything's in the open. But a lot of people don't come from that type of family where everything is suppressed. Everybody hides stuff. So it's like, I can't let you know about this, because if you know about it, something bad's going to happen. So I want to know how they fight. I want to know how they talk. See, I mistook a low conflict marriage as a good communication marriage, where unfortunately my ex-wife and I came from a big family. She did not. She was the only child. So they didn't talk about things the way we did. So I just assumed everything's good. Because if you had a problem with me, you're going to tell me. Everything good? Yeah, everything's good. Good. I'm good then. Because in my family, everything good? No, it ain't good. You did this, and this, and then I go, okay. Let me unpack that for you. Let's try to come to a resolution of some sort. But yeah, I see that, and that's typically what it is. It's more of a communication issue. I mean, we do this in our businesses, right? We take inventory. We have meetings. I hate to say that a relationship is like a business, but in some ways it is. And we go like, hey, what do we want to accomplish this year? What do we want to accomplish this month? What do we have business plans for our businesses. We kind of have life plans, but we don't have relationship plans. What are your expectations? And this, I'm going to butcher this, but basically, I see most relationships fail because someone in the relationship is held accountable to a set of standards that they were never given the playbook to. So all of a sudden, it's like, I don't like this happening, but I've never told you this. I just assume that you should know this. And a lot of times, we think the other person's a mind reader, and they're not. It's just like, it's a funny story. I was on a date with a young lady, and beautiful, great.
How young?
Young enough. So anyway, she had unfortunately had gone through a divorce too, and beautiful, had her life together, all this stuff, and we were in the midst of talking. I always want to know what happened in somebody's life, because these present red flags to me, who I'm not, I would love to do it again, but I want to do it right. I want to be like Ryan and say, hey, it's the best decision I've ever made. So I'm just like, hey, unpack this. I want to hear your story. Tell me what it is. And after hearing her story, I was going like, I literally told her, I was like, I think you need to call your ex-husband and work this thing out. Because there wasn't that much going on. I mean, it was basically just normal. 2 kids, both had careers. What happened? Well, he just stopped kissing me before he left for work. I was like, do you ever tell him? Well, I shouldn't have to tell him. I said, we're not mind readers. We get comfortable. We get comfortable in our relationships. And I said, if that's the worst thing he ever did, he wasn't an addict, he didn't abuse you, He was a good father, a provider. I was like, I think you should call your ex-husband. She said, are we on a date or is this a therapy session? I said, you call it what it is, but I speak truth. And so when I see something, I'm not about to get into a relationship with you who ended a relationship over something so small. Because I would do the exact same thing if not called out on it. And I would like to say I wouldn't, but you know how us guys are. We become comfortable and we need to be in check. So I call it as simple as like just rate it. Like, hey, rate me. How am I doing? Like 1 to 10. Am I a 7? Am I a 9? What can I improve on? I do this with my children all the time. I'm like, hey, how could I be a better dad? Ah, you can't be a better dad right now. You're the best dad in the whole. No, but tell me about what I'm doing that maybe I could improve on, or maybe I could do less of. And we can get into some deep dives when we do that. So I think that's the biggest thing, is I think that relationships are held to expectations that they're never granted what those expectations are. And that's the breakdown of most relationships. And if they would just go, hey, I don't like it when you go out and play poker and come home at 2 a.m. I'd rather you come home at 12. You know, I don't mind if you go do your thing. I don't like it when you go with your guys all the time and you don't want me to come. Like that, those are, you know, I don't like it when you spend money without me knowing what it's for. Like if that's something that's set up front, then there are expectations that you can shoot for, and then you can be in charge of going like, hey, I don't like those expectations, and I don't think I want to continue with this relationship. Before it gets to the point of years down the road, and all of a sudden it's like, well, I didn't know you wanted to do this. I didn't know this is what you wanted. This is what you, and then I think you look at, I think a lot of people, I'm a guy, so I can only speak on my behalf for, I think a lot of guys, maybe it has to do with their mom, and I think a lot of females, it has to do with their dad, and what their expectations are, what they saw, and if you're going to match up, if you're going to measure up, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, and guys the same way. We're kind of like, you know, we saw what our mom was, you know, what kind of wife she was to our fathers, or what kind of mom she was to us, and then we kind of hold sometimes our partner accountable to a standard that they're not aware of. So I hope that kind of hits.
No, it
close
did,
to
man. It did. A lot of people are hitting rewind right now.
Yeah, that's sorry. I hope that made sense. So.
Yeah, but you did allude to something when you mentioned with Ryan. I want to kind of touch on this for a lot of guys that might go through divorce, is finding love after divorce. Because like you said, best decision you've ever made. I'd love to know what that exploration process is like, because for a lot of guys going through it, and we've alluded to, you know, feeling like a failure or that pride being hurt. Yeah. You know, and we've all heard, you know, failure isn't final. This is not the end. Yeah. So there, you know, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, there is more life to live, and we're talking about life after divorce. I'd love to know what your journey was like, kind of finding love again.
Yeah, I mean, Match.com. Actually, it's where I don't mind saying, in the age of the internet, I was moving back from New York, and my wife and I had divorce been finalized, and you know, I was ready to start dating again. And ironically, I was convinced after my marriage that I was never going to do it again. Yeah. I wasn't the guy carrying the sign around. Like, I don't know that I ever said that to anyone, but internally I was like, the Alfords are a unique brand of people. My sister and my dad, I think, are the same way. We don't need someone else to be fulfilled. We are all human beings, and that doesn't mean, and my wife has heard this, so she's not going to watch this and go, what the hell? Like, I don't know what it is. We can be alone. We can be, like, it's not that we don't want a partner or anything like that, but like, I didn't get married till I was 29 the first time. Yeah. And then it was kind of like social pressure, and I thought we'd met someone compatible, and you know, all those things we talked about. But coming out of my divorce, was like, I was ready to date. I liked to have a companion to go out, but I just thought it would, you know, I just thought I'd probably never do it again. Yeah. I just didn't feel like I needed it, and then, you know, it's you know, again, no matter what side you sit on in the divorce, it's painful, and so the thought of ever putting yourself in a position that you might have to go through that again, you don't want to. But in literally, I think it was like Nicole was like maybe the second or third person I even went on a date with, and it was probably after our second or third date, I was like, I was like, God, I wish I hadn't met her so fast. Like, not in a bad way, it's in a good way. But I was like, damn. It's like I was hoping that this wouldn't come. Maybe this wouldn't ever come along, in a way. But I kind of knew immediately, and we dated, and it was just, it's funny. I almost feel like men should not get married until they're 35 years old. I feel like it's not only a maturity thing, but I think it's like, I don't think you know yourself well enough. And I can't speak for a woman because I'm not a woman. Maybe it's the same for a woman, but I think women are typically more mature. I just think you're still figuring out life and yourself, and no matter whether you've been successful or not in your 20s, and I was fortunate enough to be successful in my 20s, but I still didn't know myself really, or know exactly what I wanted, and then I was right around 35 when I met Nicole, I think 36, and it was a process of, it took as much for me to go, I knew immediately, within the first few dates that like this was more than I had anticipated, but it actually took, a few months for me to kind of almost get over myself of going, can I do this again? Like go down this path again. But then, you get warm and fuzzy in a relationship, and you get everything that's great about the relationship, but with a newfound, I don't wish divorce on anyone, but I almost think every man should go through it because I think it's going to make you better. I have to think, if you looked at the percentage, and I know a lot of people that get married, divorced once, get divorced 3 times. I'm sure there's numbers for that too, but I would guess though that the second time around for men, the percentage rate is a million times higher than the first, of its lasting, because you learn about yourself, and you learn what you want, and you learn that a marriage or a relationship is like the bank. There's withdrawals and there's deposits, and if you're always taking, even subconsciously, you never get out of it what you want. You got to learn to deposit and back on the other person, back on the relationship. And I didn't recognize that until the second time around, and it's made all the difference in the world. That combined with just meeting the right person. But you have to get in the mindset and be ready and be honest with yourself if you can do it again, the second time around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's so much more that kind of goes in my head, so we kind of do have to wrap it up, though.
Yeah.
Any closing remarks before we say goodbye to the folks that are probably watching, and they're looking at themselves and looking at their situation? They're maybe asking for one quick glimmer of hope. What would you say to them? George, we'll start with you.
Well, I heard Ryan just speaking on that, and it kind of tied into something that Charles was asking about, and I think that so many times we try to find ourselves in a partner. And so much like Ryan, like I've gone long stretches of my life in solitude, and that's what I tell. I go on way more dates than 3. I've dated a lot of people, and that's kind of a funny thing. Is they're like, what didn't work? And I'm just like, well, when I enjoy your presence more than I enjoy my solitude, then I know that there's something there for me to pursue. But whenever I'm with someone and I'm kind of going, okay, I'd rather just be alone right now. But I think so many people are afraid to be alone. So I think that's why we see so many divorces and so many broken relationships, is because someone will typically set up the next relationship and jump to that one, thinking that one's going to bring them what this one didn't. And we're always trying to find ourselves in the next thing, and we almost will mold ourselves and become that person that we think will be that version of ourselves with that person. And then that person doesn't, fulfill us. So I think it's all about fulfillment and what fulfills you. If you're looking to another person to fulfill you, then I got surprise, it's never going to happen. So until you can be fulfilled alone by yourself, and just, for me, my relationship with Christ and who He's made me to be, and be okay with that guy, then no one's going to satisfy that. So I would say that, you know, I would tell people, somebody going through it, don't worry. It's never as bad as you think it is. It will be okay. No, you're not going crazy. Don't jump to a next relationship thinking that that's going to solve everything, because all you're going to do is, like what Ryan was saying, and I've heard him say, is this gave him time to kind of rebuild or reflect and figure out exactly who he was, much like myself. You know, I learned that, you know, I can't control life, and to accept life as it is versus how we think it should be is a much easier way to live.
Man, they just they kind of put something together there. I mean, I think, you know, and I talk a lot about finding internal sources of motivation, internal sources of being okay, internal sources of happiness. Because when you have an external source of happiness, at some point that's going to go away, and your happiness goes with it. So when your happiness and your sense of self-worth comes from in here, you never worry about it going away. But that being said, these guys have talked a lot. The thing that they both have shared, and if you put it together, Ryan said 35, which honestly is just getting older and getting mature and learning. And that goes totally with what he said, with finding yourself, knowing yourself. Don't define yourself by a relationship. Define yourself, know who you are, know where your life, your self-worth, your happiness comes from. And then in your search for possibly having a partner, because you're already defined, you are who you are, find someone who complements that and build your relationship there versus all these external factors, defining yourself as a pair, defining yourself as a couple. Define yourself, learn yourself, love yourself, be mature and be ready. And if I've listened to these guys, and I think I was really trying to listen, make sure you're ready and then find your partner from there.
I would agree with that.
Any closing remarks?
No, I mean, I'm happy to talk about it. I'm tried to grow about being. You can ask me anything, I'll tell you, but I've tried to become more reflective and transparent in discussing stuff like this. So it feels good to talk about it. I don't mind talking about it, and if I can help someone else that's potentially going through it, then if it's one person, then it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys don't mind, I'll be sure to have your contacts in the show notes of this episode. And Charles, thank you for sitting on the panel as well.
I loved it. Thank both of you guys, man.
Yeah,
it was insightful.
I appreciate the insight, guys, and I appreciate you guys rocking with us all the way to the end. There was so much value in this episode. To kind of run through it really quick, the internal wars that Ryan mentioned, fighting while in the moment, and also you do feel a little bit like a failure. Anybody that's watching this going through divorce, we can understand that feeling, but it's important to, as George says, it's not final. It's not the end. There is more life to live, and it's a time for reflection. We're afraid of change, holding on too long. Great question from Charles, asking for anyone that might be in a spot in their relationship that might not be working. Are you holding on too long? Is this something worth working out? As George was mentioning, the communication, I had to write down, low conflict does not equal good communication. Pay attention to that. And I'm kind of going through the show notes, so you guys are just going to have to go back and watch this all over. But the last key we talked about was knowing yourself, being okay with yourself and comfortable with yourself, because that's where the joy comes from. And that is how you can help get yourself through. And don't isolate, men. Don't isolate. Go out there, communicate with someone that is close to you, someone who will be real with you and honest with you. And as always, do your best to be a modern man.